Welcome to the Behind Beliefs and Behaviors podcast, where we take you on a journey of what is behind the specific beliefs and behaviors that impact individuals and organizations. With our guests, we get to the root cause of what stands in the way of everything from health, wealth, and relationships to leadership, community transformation, and societal progress. From topics on leadership, psychological safety, corporate culture and communication, to parenting, trauma, relationships, personal health, and intimacy, this podcast is sure to get you to the source and provide you practical tips to transform your life one root cause at a time. I am your host, Dr. Maisha Claiborne. I'm a physician, a coach, a consultant, and an expert in trauma-informed communication. The founder of the Mind Remapping Company, I help individuals and organizations better understand the brain, behavior, and the root of false beliefs so that you can more effectively listen, communicate, connect, and create fulfilling relationships and results in your personal and professional life. Join us every Monday morning at 8 a.m. and let's get to the root cause and discover what's behind your beliefs and behaviors. All right. Welcome back to another episode. This guest that I have with me today, we were just talking back on the back channels about how we've known each other for some time now. I think it's been some years actually. And we live in the same city, and yet we've never actually met in person. I really love what she does, what she stands for. And I am so looking forward to the conversation. We're talking about finding out pleasure outside of the bedroom today with Natasha Riley. She is the owner of Chantel and Company, and she is a licensed sex therapist. And so, there are a lot of directions we've talked about we could go inside of this conversation. So I don't even know where it's going to go, but I do believe that the conversation around intimacy, sex, finding pleasure, I think it's a useful conversation, not just for relationships, but in all contexts. So I know some people listening to this conversation may be, well, how does this apply to me? You better stay tuned, because I'm sure you're going to find something that you can resonate with around this conversation. So welcome to the show, Natasha. Thank you for being here.
For having me. I always love talking things, pleasure, sex, and intimacy.
Yes, indeed. Well, I always like to have the audience get to know the guest. And so I'm going to ask you if you could just share a little bit about who you are, what is a little bit about your journey. How did you come to be where you are today?
There have been many twists and turns over the last couple of years, but I am Natasha. I am a licensed sex therapist here in the state of Georgia. I am also a clinical sexologist and a pleasure strategist. So the journey to being a therapist, I always knew I wanted to be a therapist. Like, there was no doubt about that. I always tell people, being the kid watching the stuff I wasn't supposed to be watching in the middle of the night, that is what introduced me to the idea of a sex therapist. And I was like, I can do that. I had no clue what I was talking about, but I can do that. That seems doable. And that is the route that I took. And I got my degree in mental health. And now I focus on helping couples, moving away from couples, because that's hard work, and women kind of find their sexual wellness, which I have found sexual wellness does not start in the bedroom. I was very disappointed my first 3 months of actually doing sex therapy, and we weren't talking about sex. So it took a while for me to get because that's not your problem. And so now that's what I try to convey through my messaging, is especially because majority of my clients are Black women, it has a lot to do with you first and how you experience the world and explore yourself. That's going to translate into the bedroom.
Oof, I love what you just said, how you experience the world and yourself. And that translates back into the bedroom. Let's talk about that. And I would love to know, in your experience, what have you seen have been the constraints around women, but particularly Black women, in terms of how we experience the world from an intimacy, from a pleasure standpoint?
Oh, I could wrap that up in like one phrase: being in my head.
Oh, say more about that. Now you got to say more about that now.
Right. So, for the most part, we spend a lot of time in our heads, right? We spend a lot of time thinking and learning and being logical and problem solving, and experiencing sex, experiencing pleasure is not of the mind. It's not,
Mhm.
it's of the body. However, we're so disconnected from our bodies that we don't even know the beginning of how to experience the world through our body.
Mhm.
So that's one of the main things when I do consultations with clients. They're like, "Oh my gosh, Tasha, I'm so in my head," to the point where I could say it for them. And
Mhm.
they're like, "Yes, oh my God, that's exactly what it is."
Yeah.
So we have to take them through the hard journey of being reconnected with their bodies, because a lot of them have this interesting relationship based off of how they've grown up, based off of messaging, based off of, things that could have happened to them, where they've decided that they don't want to be of their body. It's just something that moves them around. But other than that, I would rather not engage with it because it doesn't do what I feel like it should be doing and what other people say that it should be doing.
Oh my gosh, my brain is firing off in a bunch of like a million different directions just from that piece. And I love everything you said. So the first thing that came to mind when you said, we're always in our head, and the first thought that came to my mind to finish that sentence would be by necessity. By perceived necessity. I'm gonna edit that. By perceived necessity. Because if and you probably see this, like if you think about like historically what we're taught growing up is, we have to be the best, we have to
Oh, yeah.
sometimes it's hard to get, so we get so focused, especially professional women, on like making it. We're always strategizing, we're always having
Mhm.
to navigate these various obstacles, and we have to use our brain to do it, so much so that it gets disconnected from our body.
Mhm.
We get
Mhm.
disconnected from our body. So like that was one of the things that kind of came up as you were speaking. And then the other piece that came up is when you said like sometimes we would rather not be in our bodies because the body doesn't do what we want it to do. And
Mhm.
what came up for me was a conversation I was having yesterday with another therapist, in fact, more like more around physical health,
Right.
and or that is okay. Let me reframe that. More around like the medical
Mhm.
aspect of like diabetes and
Right.
hypertension, and like the beliefs around food and things of that nature. Which really all this is intricately related. However, we talked about this fact of being in our bodies and being in our emotions, and how it's so physically uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
It's very physically uncomfortable. And so like one of the examples is I hate to cry because it's exhausting and it feels bad in my body. And so like, we tend then there's this like disconnecting ourselves from our emotions to numb ourselves out.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like what came up was the thinking around that. I'd love
Mhm.
your thoughts around that.
All of that. Yep, like all of that is very much true. I too struggled with what it meant to cry. For me, it was more so of this is weakness and I'm not weak. Like I need to show up and I need to do things and I need to get it done. And
Mhm,
my idea was like, okay, something has happened, Natasha, you have 48 hours and then you need to get your shit together. Like
mhm,
we don't have
mhm,
time. That is like what I was notorious for saying. We don't have time for this. You need
mhm,
to get it together. And
mhm,
since I have started learning and leaning more into holistic and somatic healing and like things
mhm.
of that nature, your girl is crying all the time. I'm like, oh my God, what is the problem? Everything. And I'm just like, oh my God, I don't know. But I don't fight it anymore because I recognize that sitting on that made me angry. It made me not fun to be around. It made me
Mhm,
frustrated. It made me stressed out. I couldn't
mhm,
sleep. That person isn't who I wanted to be because I was so busy stuffing everything down. And so
mhm,
I allow my body, my eyes to release whatever it needs to
mhm,
do. And once it's done, it's done. And then I move on. I don't judge
mhm,
it. I don't make it mean anything. And I still love me at the end of it. I'm not weak. If anything, I'm a lot more stronger for allowing myself to feel and express.
mhm. Yeah. As you were talking about the "I don't have time for" conversation, man, that is a universal. I don't have time to be sick. I don't
Mm-hmm. Oh,
have
yeah.
time to I don't have time to cry. I don't have time to have feelings. I
Yep.
don't have time to have feelings.
Yep.
It's interesting. I was having a conversation with my auntie. We were talking about a conversation that she was gonna have with, my cousin, and she says, "I'm really new to this whole conversation, or no, she said this conversation around expressing emotions is really new."
Mm-hmm.
She said, back in the day, like we didn't have time for emotions. And I really
Mm-hmm.
get that because, if you think about the generation and what was happening in our parents' generation,
Mm-hmm.
that's civil rights, that's Jim Crow, that's like, all this era where you can't show emotion. That's probably partly where that conversation came from
Absolutely.
generationally, like during the times of enslavement.
Mm-hmm.
You show weakness, you're dead.
Absolutely.
Right? And so now it's like, don't cry, don't feel, don't even laughing and enjoying oneself
Mm-hmm.
was a problem
Right.
during those times, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you're laughing, you could be dead. Like
Right.
any emotion, you could be dead. So then we had, and like generationally or historically, we had to suppress those emotions to live. And
Right.
now this is generationally this has been passed down. And so yeah, so I wonder if you have seen, I'm trying to figure out how am I asking this question, that we're disconnecting ourselves from our emotion. Are we also disconnecting ourselves from fun? Like have we disconnected ourselves from the
Oh,
conversation fun as well?
absolutely. Absolutely, because there's too much work to do. Why would I go out here and have fun? Like, right? Like there's too much work to be had. How dare
Mhm,
I have a seat and have fun and not
mhm,
get to my to-do list and not be productive? Because if I'm not productive, then I'm not providing anybody with value. Not valuable
mhm,
and I'm not worthy if I'm not doing something that gets an end result for someone else.
mm,
You
man.
know?
So then,
So yeah.
yeah. So then, we can look at, in the context of anti-oppression, we can look at fun
Mhm.
and reconnecting to our emotions as resistance.
Absolutely.
Resistance to, to this culture of oppression.
Mhm.
Ah, so interesting.
Isn't it? Right, that all those things just took living away from us. So when you talk about, and that's something I have to explain to my clients too, right? Like we're not that far removed in our generation from everything that has happened. And so when you think about the conversations that were happening in the household, like you
Mhm,
mentioned our parents,
mhm,
what else would they be teaching us? Right? Like when you talk about your mom,
mhm,
what else would she say to us other than you need to clean, you need to take care of your family? Like when you have a family, it's all about them. All your dreams are out the window.
mhm,
Like that's all she knew. So she doesn't know what to tell us.
mhm.
However, we are in a new place, right?
Yes.
And that is not our truth. And so
Mhm.
what I try to stress to my clients is you're not in survival mode. Like you're
Yes.
not surviving. And even to take it further, I don't want you to just live because living is doing the bare minimum. Like I can pay my bills, I can do this, I can do that. Like I want you to thrive. And
That's right.
pleasure is thriving,
That's
joy
right.
is thriving, laughing, fun, being able to sit down just because you want to sit down, being able to take a day off just because you want to take a day off,
Mhm.
blowing bubbles with your kids. That's thriving because you're
Yes.
doing it because it's solely what you want to do. It is above what is the bare minimum that you have to do in order to function in this world.
Yeah. And some women don't even know what fun is. What does it feel like? What does it feel like to have fun? What is it? So that's, oh man, I love this. I love that this is a part of the conversation that you're having with women in order to bring them back to, they think
Mhm,
the one thing is wrong,
mhm.
or,
Oh, yeah.
what they're struggling with, but when they're struggling with something completely different,
Mhm,
like, and so I'd love to like hear, in terms of how do you reconnect, what are some of the ways that you reconnect women to their experience of fun and their experience of pleasure?
I love this question. I have been going crazy this week about this question because there is a Kelly Rowland interview that's going around and she talks about it so well. the basic way that you can get back to experiencing life is your five senses. So Kelly Rowland talks about she's a sensualist, and she talks
Mm,
about how being able to smell a cologne or candles,
mm,
the crackle of the candle and everything. She said, if you can stimulate all five of my senses, I don't know what type of person you're going to get out of me.
mhm,
So that is literally what it is going back to being a child. A child
mhm,
experiences their world through their senses. They picking up stuff, they putting stuff in their mouth, they constantly look, they're constantly doing.
mhm,
That is how you're going to get connected to yourself. Stop going
mm,
on autopilot and actually pay attention to what you see. What does it
mhm,
feel like? What does it smell like? What does it
mhm,
taste like? Like,
mhm,
what are you hearing? When you're
mhm,
intentional about that, you keep following what feels good. So it's like, okay, I like this feeling. What's the next thing that I can do that feels like this? And then what's
mhm,
the next thing? And you're building your pleasure toolbox because now I may only have three things, but I can incorporate these three things every day. And now I make sure that I have pleasure practice in my life.
mhm. I love that. I love this, what is it? What does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What does it sound like? And then how does that feel in your body? Because
Mm-hmm.
then that connection, and then you sort of catalog that, right? You lock that into your
Yeah.
cells, and your cellular memory begins, and then
Mm-hmm.
it becomes easier to access each
Mm-hmm.
time. So then when you take it back into the bedroom, you're it's like it sounds to me like there are things that you can access a lot
Right.
from a sensory standpoint.
Right. Right.
Oh,
Right.
that's
Because if I like a lavender candle on
mhm.
a day to day basis, and I make the decision to include this calendar, Lord,
Yeah.
this lavender candle in the midst of our foreplay. So
Mhm.
now not only am I with this person that I enjoy and I want to have this experience with, but now also like my senses are being tantalizing. Like I can hear the
Mm.
candle and I can smell it. And it just smells so good. And it just makes
Mhm.
me want to let go that
Mhm.
much more. And so that's just one sense. Like
Mhm.
imagine like experiencing all five. And then once you get to a place where you're really in tune with your senses, imagine taking some away and being
Mhm.
heightened in others more
Mhm.
than you are with another one.
Mhm. Wow,
Yeah.
that's powerful. That is powerful. So, I would really love to dig into because we're as we're talking about this, sex in our community can be a taboo topic,
Yes.
and I'd love to, sort of like we could have a whole conversation about this. So not like delve all the way into it like that. There's a whole podcast to be had
Yeah.
just around this conversation, but to dip our toe in, the constraints that we have around this conversation of pleasure
Hmm.
from a community standpoint.
Well, as far as being a woman, as far as being a Black woman, when we talk about pleasure, just like you mentioned, there was no pleasure for our ancestors, right? Like when you think about sex, it was something that was taken from them. It was
Mhm,
something, it was used as harm against them. It was used as a weapon. You
mhm,
had no autonomy over your body. Your body didn't belong to you. It belonged to whoever wanted what they wanted at that moment,
mhm,
whether it was the master or, someone else, his son, his brother, or someone on the street. So there was again that survival of I have to disconnect from my body and I have to use it for survival. I got to do what I got to do with it. But
mhm,
then you start moving into a space where this is happening to you, but you're also being taught that your body is meant to procreate when you start, being introduced to the church and that's what it's for. And like there is no pleasure for you. There are so many clients where they're like, I never even thought about the idea that sex was something that I was supposed to be enjoying. Like I
mhm,
always went in trying to make sure that my partner was good, but it's
mhm,
never something where I was just like, it's fine if I don't want to do it. I'm going to do it to please you, or it's fine if I'm not enjoying it in the moment. Like, as long as you're good, I'm good. And I'm just like, well, let's stop doing that immediately.
patriarchal. Wow.
Right. So there's a lot of unlearning. There's a lot of damage that has to be unlearned. And it's hard because it still happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much harm that's being done. I also think that there are these conversations, societal conversation of what it means to be a lady,
Oh gosh,
right? What it is to be beautiful, what it is to be, what it is to be a woman,
to be a
right?
wife, to
To
be
be,
a this, to be a that.
yes,
There's
to be
so
a
many
girlfriend.
constructs to
So
all of
many,
it.
yeah. And all of those conversations are constraints that are put up on women,
Hmm.
and particularly women of color, because when you think about whatever the constraint that is put up on women, the constraint upon Black women and or other women of color, particularly Black women, let's talk about it, is almost 10 times more,
Hmm.
right? And so I think it's extremely important to recognize the source of that constraint.
Yeah, we all know where it comes from.
As we recognize the source of that constraint, being able to dismantle those old conversations, right? Dismantle and
Ooh.
yeah. I think that's the key. I'm like, once you insight only goes so far,
Right.
right? Insight only goes so far. It is helpful to be able to name it, because it takes the blame off of the individual. It takes the,
Hmm.
like, there's nothing wrong with us.
No,
And
right,
for
right. It's
so
not
many,
you.
yeah, like for so long, the messaging, and no, not for so long, it continues to be there's
Hmm.
something wrong
Hmm.
with us, right?
Right.
And so to understand, oh, that's not our conversation. Oh, this constraint, that's an inherited thing. That's an
Hmm.
inherited conversation. That's not mine. That's helpful. But then to be able to dismantle that, so that, like with what you do, you can take new actions.
Yes. Yes, it's a lot of unlearning, and I always say it's hard work, but it's necessary. So when you get to the other side of all of this new person that you've created when like working through it, you feel you can feel it. Like you can
Mhm.
feel the heaviness is gone. You can feel connected. The decisions that you make are so much better because we're not making decisions based off of what everyone else wants. We're making decisions off of what feels good for us. And also recognizing that when we do what feels good for us, everyone else benefits from it. Nobody wants a
Mhm.
grumpy, frumpy, agitated, angry person walking around like telling us what to do and feeding us food. Like, you're not making my food with love. You're angry, right? So,
Mhm.
when you do that work to really live a life that you want to experience,
Mhm.
everyone benefits. And whether you want to be a role model or not, people are watching you, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So you have the little people watching you. You even like my mom has gotten so much out of what I do, and she asks questions, and she has grown in herself as a like a grown woman
Mhm.
just by the conversations that we're able to have. So like I'm doing it on both ends. But there are some people who they are okay.
Yeah.
They're okay where they're at. They're
Mhm.
okay with their thought process. And we have to let that be okay too. Just because we want to change, just because
Mhm.
we want to, everyone wants to be in their soft girl era and they don't want to do all the things and they don't want to be strong and resilient, doesn't mean that someone's not looking at us say, well, that's lazy. Well, when in my day, your day is not my day. That's
That's
one
right.
of those things where it's like,
That's right.
that is not a me problem. And I'm not going to take that on as mine because it's not, because this is how I want to be better for
Yeah.
myself and, for anyone that's around me that I love.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. It a thought occurred to me. This work that you do, it also imbues confidence.
Oh, yeah.
You can, yeah. So I can imagine, and I'm going to speak to it. I'm going to speak to it inside of like career and professional
Hmm.
life, because it's a cycle. Like we separate these things, but none of this is really in silos, right? So
Hmm.
how you do anything is how you do everything. And when you can
Hmm.
find pleasure in life, when you can find pleasure in life that translates to the bedroom. When
Mm-hmm.
you, it's almost like you're finding who you are and you're finding yourself, which brings more confidence, but it also brings more creativity. I think
Mm-hmm.
it brings more flexibility of behavior
Mm-hmm.
because now you have access to parts of you that you didn't before. You're accessing parts of your brain that you weren't accessing before. So like when we're just in our thinking brain, we're just in our like disconnected from our body, we're disconnecting from an intelligence that's
Mm-hmm.
there. We're disconnecting from an intuition that's there. And
Yeah.
when you reconnect back into your body, when you reconnect back into pleasure, you reconnect into your creativity and your fun, and then you enjoy your work more. You are more
Absolutely.
confident in the room, in the rooms, and in the
Mm-hmm.
executive suites or the whatever the exam, whatever it is that you're in, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
more confident and you're more flexible with people. Your interaction with people is different. So I just, people who are like, well, this is one conversation. It's not. It's not one conversation. It's a spectrum
Right.
of the conversation that one absolutely relates to the other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is something that can also be very overwhelming, right? Because when you're changing who you are, that means everything around you changes. So the people that
That's
you
right.
hang out with, the things that
Mhm.
you thought you like, even as simple as like the food, it's like, I only eat this because like my parents liked it. And so it was always part of my routine. And now I realize I really don't like this and I don't want to eat it anymore. So
Right.
there is the excitement of figuring out who you are, but also the
Mhm.
fear of loss that comes with figuring out who you are. And
Mhm.
the idea that, man, had I done this earlier, I could have been doing and feeling this earlier. And
Yeah.
that brings a lot of emotion, depending on
Yeah.
how old the person is and them looking at how they've been living their lives. Because they're always like, just I could have been doing this. You could
Yeah.
have, but this is where we're at right now. So let's read what was and let's get excited for what can be.
Let's have grace for
Hmm.
ourselves, right? I think that sometimes, well, not a lot of times, we do not give ourselves grace.
Absolutely.
Like, yes, what you were doing was what you were doing, but in my training, in my world, we say people are doing the best they can with the resources that they
Hmm.
have available, and the resources that they have based on where they are might have been the best choice available at that time.
Absolutely. That's
And
what
so
we
like,
bring over here too.
yes, give yourself grace, women.
Yes. Treat yourself like you would treat a child.
That's right. Like you, yes, I would say that. There was, I heard you say that, and there's probably like, yes. And then it was like, well, sometimes
I know,
they
depending on
be two children.
depending. Y'all
Woo.
know what I mean.
Yeah, we know what you mean. But when you have like, where you're people like us, and you're like, you think of all the
Yeah.
except that,
Yeah.
not that.
Yeah.
But yes, treat yourself with compassion. You deserve it. I have loved this conversation. I feel like we could go on and on. We could talk
Absolutely.
for like this conversation could go on, and there's multiple pathways that it could go down. Perhaps we need to talk about a part two of this
Oh,
conversation.
I'm
Yeah,
always down for part twos.
gosh, yes. And I mean, I really love the conversation around intimacy, and maybe that's the I think there's a whole conversation we had just about
Hmm.
intimacy and how we view intimacy and where that what are the myths behind intimacy. So I guess I've just made public a part two for us. It's a long time coming. We've been needing to have conversations for a while anyway, but I
Yes.
just appreciate even this as a foundational conversation of finding pleasure, finding oneself and what we like, reconnecting into our bodies, reconnecting into our emotions, and
Hmm.
finding that pleasure outside of the bedroom, and that leading to more pleasure inside of the bedroom, leading to more intimacy and fun, leading to more to better relationships in
Hmm.
general, leading to more confidence,
Oh
leading
yeah.
to more creativity, leading,
Hmm.
leading to all of these things by finding pleasure outside of the bedroom and reconnecting to our bodies and discovering who we are at our core. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're so welcome. Let's thrive. Let's all just choose to thrive.
Yes, ma'am. We thriving is where it's at. That is the conversation.
Hmm.
That is the conversation. Well, I want to first ask, who are the people who you love to work with the best? Like those, so that our audience can self-identify. If you are fill in the blank, then I might be the person for you.
Okay. Ooh. So if you are a Black high achieving woman, you're probably in your late 30s to 50s, and you realize that the way that you have been doing things is just not working anymore. You feel lost. You feel like you don't know who you are anymore. You don't know who is looking back at you in the mirror, and you're ready to get connected to yourself on all levels, then I would be the person for you.
Awesome. And then just to clarify, are people from all over the country able to work with you, or are you able to work with people in a particular region?
So, therapy wise, I'm able to work with people in Georgia.
Mhm.
Coaching wise, I have made some pivots. So, I'm not doing one on one, but I do have some rest retreats. So, if you want
Mhm.
to experience a weekend next year, we're going to be doing a little bit longer. But if you are willing to kind of step away and disconnect from all those that feel like they can't live without you, like if you're willing
Mhm.
to take that risk with me, then
Mhm.
you can definitely join me on one of my sit your ass down digital detox retreats. Cute, right?
That is cute. That is so cute. Yes.
Yeah.
Rest retreat. Sit your ass down somewhere
Yeah.
and
Yes, it
rest.
came from, you know how you go to somebody's house and they've cooked for you, or they come to your house and you're like, girl, sit down. And they just trying to clean and put stuff away. They're like, no, it's fine. Girl, sit your ass down. I didn't ask you to do all that. Just sit down. That's where I got that from.
I love it. No, you know what? Immediately relatable. I love that. I love that. Do you have one coming up soon?
I do. I have one. It's going to be a weekend one, domestic in September, and it's going to be in the North Georgia mountains. So we're just going to sit in the cabin and do some holistic care. It's not a whole bunch of workshopping, it's a whole bunch of you getting comfortable with sitting with your own mind without your devices.
Okay, good. And so we will make sure that we have the link to register for that retreat in our show
Mhm.
notes. Yes, because we definitely want people to register for this rest retreat, and you can come from wherever you're coming from to the North Georgia
Yep,
mountain.
come on to the mountains.
That's right. I'm in Georgia. It is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful up there. So for sure, register before she fills up, and you have to wait to the next one. Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. And then finally, if people want to reach out to you, if they want to get in touch with you, what is the best way they can follow you? They can find you. Talk to us about how they can work
Yeah.
with
So you can follow me on Facebook under Natasha Chantel, and then you can come over to TikTok. That's my fun spot over there.
you. That's
Chantel
right.
and Co. I have so much fun on TikTok.
Yes.
Or if you just need a quick fix, you can go to my podcast, Owning Pleasure as a Black Woman, and you can start implementing the gems like today.
So here you have it. Go and connect with Natasha, connect with her on social media. Go listen to Owning Pleasure as a Black Woman podcast. Here are her social media channels. We're going to have all of her information in the show notes so that you can follow her. We're going to also have the link to her retreat in those show notes as well. And just again, thank you so much for being here with me on this part one of our conversation.
You are welcome, Asia. Thank you for having me.
It has been my pleasure. I look forward to more. And so, for you all out there listening, I have to thank you because without the listeners, there is no podcast. We appreciate you. Your job is to take what you've heard today and go and apply it to your life. Listen, it's time for you to reconnect to yourself. It's time for you to reconnect to pleasure. I want you to connect with Natasha here and then share this episode. Share it with a friend, share it with a colleague, share it with a family member, share it with someone you meet in the grocery line. I don't care, just share it because we need to be empowering each other. And write a review so that those who come to this podcast know how we are making a difference in your life and in the lives of others. And finally, subscribe so that you know when our podcasts are coming out. So, with that, I bid you adieu. And until our next conversation, y'all stay empowered.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We know that without the listeners, there is no podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe so you do not miss when we drop our next episode. And share this podcast with a friend, a family member, and a colleague, at least one person in your life today. This episode was brought to you by the Mind Remapping Company, helping organizations create psychologically and emotionally safe cultures that make their employees and leaders feel seen, heard, respected, welcome, and valued, all while fostering a thriving, engaged, and healthy workforce for the organization. Is your organization in need of a speaker? I speak about topics like psychological and emotional safety, trauma-informed communication, and employee well-being. If this is aligned with your organizational inclusion, belonging, or leadership goals, contact me, Dr. Maisha, by going to www.mindremappingacademy.com. That's mindremappingacademy.com. Finally, we train leaders, but we also train coaches. If you're interested in becoming a trauma-informed coach, visit our website as well and check out our NLP coach trainings and certifications. We'll see you on the next episode. Until then, stay empowered.